The morning sun cast a golden glow over the cobblestone streets of Westbrook as Mei Lin Chen pulled up to her grandmother's old cottage in her worn-out blue Toyota. The car made a strange rattling sound before she turned off the engine, something she'd been meaning to fix but never found the time. This quiet seaside town had always been her childhood summer haven, but now it would be her home. Mei Lin looked at the small house with its faded yellow paint and overgrown garden. It wasn't much compared to the massive estates that dotted the hillsides of Westbrook, but to her it was perfect. Her grandmother had left it to her in the will, along with a simple note that read, "Find your peace here." She grabbed her single suitcase from the back seat and walked up the creaky wooden steps. The key stuck a little in the lock, but with a gentle wiggle, the door swung open to reveal the cozy living room just as she remembered it, slightly dusty but filled with warmth and memories. Home sweet home, Mei Lin whispered to herself. Over the next few days, Mei Lin settled into a quiet routine. She cleaned the cottage, tended to the garden where her grandmother had grown vegetables and flowers, and set up her small desk by the window overlooking the ocean. Here she would continue her remote consulting work, as she called it when anyone asked. Westbrook was a town of stark contrasts. While her grandmother's cottage sat in the older, modest part of town, just a 10-minute walk away began the sprawling mansions and upscale boutiques catering to the wealthy families who had made Westbrook their playground. One sunny Thursday afternoon, Mei Lin walked to the local coffee shop, The Daily Grind, wearing her usual outfit, comfortable jeans, a plain sweater, and worn-out sneakers. Her long black hair was tied in a simple ponytail and she wore no makeup. As she ordered her tea, she couldn't help but notice 3 elegantly dressed women at a corner table, their eyes occasionally darting in her direction, followed by hushed whispers and subtle laughter. "Are you new in town?" asked the barista, a friendly young woman with bright purple hair. "Sort of. I used to spend summers here with my grandmother, Mei Chen. She passed away last month and she left me her cottage." The barista's eyes widened. "Oh, Ms. Mei, she was the sweetest lady ever. Always had a kind word for everyone. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Mei Lin smiled softly. "I'm hoping to continue her tradition of helping around town. Do you know if the community center still needs volunteers?" "Absolutely. They're always looking for help, especially with the annual spring charity gala coming up next week." As Mei Lin nodded and took her tea, one of the well-dressed women approached the counter. Her heels clicked loudly on the wooden floor, drawing attention from everyone in the cafe. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her nails immaculately manicured, and her outfit looked straight from a designer showroom. "Dahlia, darling." The woman addressed the barista with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Be a dear and remake my latte. It tastes absolutely dreadful today." "Right away, Mrs. Harrington," Dahlia replied, her earlier cheerfulness dimming slightly. The woman, Mrs. Harrington, turned slightly toward Mei Lin, giving her a quick once-over before asking, "Are you lost, dear? The Tourist Information Center is on Maple Street." "No, I live here now," Mei Lin replied politely. "I inherited my grandmother's house." "How quaint," Mrs. Harrington said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "Well, welcome to Westbrook. It's quite a special little town." With that, she returned to her friends, who immediately huddled closer to hear whatever she had to say. Dahlia leaned over the counter as she handed Mrs. Harrington her remade latte. "Don't mind Patricia Harrington. She thinks she owns this town, because her husband's family has been here for 5 generations. It's fine," Mei Lin said with a small smile. "I've met people like her before." The next day, Mei Lin visited the community center and signed up to help with the spring charity gala. The event coordinator, an older gentleman named Harold, was thrilled to have her assistance. "Your grandmother was our most dedicated volunteer," he said warmly. "She always handled the flower arrangements and helped serve refreshments. Would you be interested in taking over those duties?" "I'd be honored," Mei Lin replied. "She taught me everything she knew about flower arranging." When the day of the gala arrived, Mei Lin arrived early at the town hall, which had been transformed with twinkling lights and white tablecloths. She wore the nicest outfit she had brought with her, a simple navy blue dress and flat shoes. It was modest but neat, and it was the best she could do. As she arranged roses and baby's breath in crystal vases, the hall began to fill with Westbrook's elite. Women in glittering gowns and men in tailored tuxedos streamed in, air-kissing each other and commenting loudly on who was wearing what designer. Patricia Harrington made her entrance like a queen, wearing a stunning red gown and diamonds that caught the light with every movement. She was surrounded by a group of equally well-dressed women who hung on her every word. Mei Lin recognized two of them from the coffee shop. "Harold, darling," Patricia called out to the event coordinator. "Everything looks divine, but I'm not sure about those flower arrangements. They're a bit simple, don't you think?" Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Actually, Patricia, Mei Lin here is following her grandmother's traditional style. Mei Chen did our flowers for over 20 years. Patricia's perfectly arched eyebrows rose as she looked at Mei Lin. "Oh, you're Mei's granddaughter. I think I saw you at the Daily Grind. How sweet of you to follow in her footsteps." One of Patricia's friends, a tall woman with unnaturally tight skin, leaned in. "Did you say Mei Chen? Wasn't she the old lady who lived in that tiny cottage on Cedar Street? The one who always wore those dreadful hand-knitted sweaters?" "The very same," Patricia replied with a small laugh. "Apparently it runs in the family." She gestured subtly toward Mei Lin's simple dress. Mei Lin pretended not to hear as she continued arranging flowers, but the sting of their words was hard to ignore. She thought of her grandmother, who had always told her that true worth came from kindness, not from fancy clothes or big houses. "Don't they have anything better to talk about?" whispered a voice beside her. Mei Lin turned to see a young woman in a black and white server's uniform. She had warm brown eyes and a friendly smile. "I'm Rosa," the woman said. "I'm a waitress at the country club, but I pick up extra shifts at these events. I'm Mei Lin. Nice to meet you." "Don't let Patricia and her vultures get to you," Rosa continued, helping Mei Lin with a particularly stubborn stem. "They treat everyone like this. Last month she reduced our hostess to tears because the table wasn't set exactly the way she wanted." As the evening progressed, Mei Lin helped serve champagne and canapes. She noticed how differently the guests treated her, compared to how they treated each other. To them she was invisible, except when they needed something or wanted to make a snide remark. During the charity auction, Mei Lin stood near the back of the room, watching as ridiculously expensive items were sold for even more ridiculous prices. The guests seemed more interested in outdoing each other than in supporting the actual cause, a new wing for the Children's Hospital. "And next up, we have a weekend getaway at the exclusive Sunset Cliffs Resort," the auctioneer announced. $10,000, called out a man in a gray suit. $15,000, countered another. Patricia Harrington raised her auction paddle. $20,000. There was a brief pause before Patricia looked around the room with a satisfied smile. The auctioneer was about to close the bidding when another voice spoke up. $25,000. All heads turned to see who had outbid Patricia Harrington. Mei Lin stood there, auction paddle in hand, her expression calm. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Patricia's face tightened with displeasure. "Sold to the young lady in blue for $25,000, the auctioneer announced after a moment of stunned silence. As Mei Lin went to the payment table to provide her details, she could feel the curious and judgmental stares. No one could understand how someone like her, someone who dressed so plainly and lived in a tiny cottage, could afford such a bid. "I didn't know being a flower arranger paid so well," Patricia remarked loudly to her friends as Mei Lin passed. "But perhaps I'm in the wrong business." The women around her laughed, their voices like wind chimes made of ice. "It's for the Children's Hospital," Mei Lin replied simply. "My grandmother always taught me to give what I can." "How charming," Patricia said with a tight smile. "Though I wonder if that cottage of yours even has room for guests to enjoy your luxury getaway." More laughter followed, but Mei Lin just smiled and walked away. Let them think what they wanted. She knew who she was, even if they didn't. As the evening came to a close, Mei Lin helped clean up while the wealthy guests departed in their luxury cars. Rosa joined her in gathering the empty champagne glasses. "That was amazing, what you did." At the auction, Rosa said. The look on Patricia's face was priceless. Maylin shrugged. It was the right thing to do. The hospital needs that wing. Still, $25,000. That's a lot of money. It is, Maylin agreed. But some things are worth it. As they finished cleaning, Harold approached with a grateful smile. Thank you for all your help tonight, Maylin. Your grandmother would be proud. And that donation, everyone's talking about it. Let them talk, Maylin said with a small laugh. It seems to be what they do best. Later that night, as Maylin drove home in her rattling Toyota, she thought about the evening. The socialites of Westbrook had made their opinion of her crystal clear. She was an outsider, someone they could ridicule and dismiss. Little did they know who she really was. Little did they know about the empire she had built, about the meetings she took on her laptop in her grandmother's cozy living room, about the billions that she managed with a few keystrokes. For now, she was content to be underestimated. Her grandmother had always said, "Be like water, appear soft and yielding, but in time you can wear away even the hardest stone." As she pulled up to the cottage, Maylin smiled to herself. This was just the beginning of her story in Westbrook, and she had a feeling it was going to get very interesting indeed. The morning after the charity gala, Maylin woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. Sunlight streamed through the faded curtains as she made herself a cup of green tea, a daily ritual she had inherited from her grandmother. As she sipped the warm drink, her phone buzzed with notifications, business emails that needed her attention. Despite what the Westbrook elite thought of her, Maylin's remote consulting was actually her managing multiple tech companies from the comfort of her grandmother's cottage. Just another day in the office, she murmured to herself as she opened her laptop. 3 hours later, after finalizing a major acquisition deal worth millions, Maylin closed her computer and decided to explore more of the town. She changed into a pair of comfortable jeans, a plain t-shirt, and her trusty sneakers. Her wardrobe choices weren't because she couldn't afford better. She owned luxury clothes that would make Patricia Harrington's eyes pop, but because she valued comfort and simplicity over showing off. The Westbrook Public Library stood on a small hill, its brick exterior weathered by decades of sea air. Maylin had spent countless summer afternoons there as a child, losing herself in books while her grandmother volunteered at the front desk. Now as she walked through the heavy wooden doors, nostalgia washed over her. "Can I help you find something?" asked an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes behind the circulation desk. "Actually, I was wondering if you need any volunteers," Maylin replied. "My grandmother, Mei Chen, used to help out here." The woman's face lit up with recognition. "You're May's granddaughter?" "Oh my goodness. I'm Dolores. I worked with your grandmother for years. She talked about you all the time, how proud she was of you." A lump formed in Maylin's throat. She was pretty special. That she was, and yes, we absolutely need volunteers. Our funding was cut last year and we've been short-staffed ever since. That afternoon, Maylin found herself sorting books and helping children find research materials for school projects. The work was simple but rewarding, especially when a young girl with glasses too big for her face hugged her after Maylin helped her find books on marine biology. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "Nobody ever takes me seriously when I say I want to be a scientist." "Well, I think you'll make an excellent scientist," Maylin replied with a smile. "And don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As Maylin was shelving the last batch of returned books, the library door opened, and Patricia Harrington walked in with 2 of her friends. They were dressed as if they were going to lunch at a 5-star restaurant rather than visiting a public library. "I still can't believe the council is considering giving more money to this place," Patricia said loudly, not bothering to lower her voice despite being in a library. "It's practically empty most of the time. We should be focusing on the new golf course development instead." "Exactly," agreed her friend, a woman with red hair piled high on her head. "Who even reads physical books anymore? Everything's digital now." Dolores cleared her throat. "Ladies, could I help you with anything today?" Patricia glanced at her dismissively. "We're just here to look at the space. The town council meeting is tomorrow and we're discussing budget allocations." "I see," Dolores replied, her voice tight. Well, feel free to look around, but please remember to keep your voices down. We do have patrons studying. Patricia waved, her hand as if shooing away a fly. Then her gaze landed on Mei Lin, who was visible between the bookshelves. Well, if it isn't the mysterious bidder from last night, Patricia said with a smirk. I didn't realize you worked here. Though I suppose one needs to make ends meet somehow, especially with that cottage to maintain. Mei Lin placed the last book on the shelf before turning to face Patricia. I'm volunteering, actually. My grandmother believed in giving back to the community. How? Noble, Patricia replied, the word dripping with condescension. Though I must say that's quite a generous donation you made last night for someone who volunteers at libraries. Her friends tittered behind her, their jewelry clinking softly as they shifted. Some things are worth more than money, Mei Lin said simply. Like making sure children have a place to learn and dream. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, well, dreams are lovely, but reality requires funding. And frankly, this library is a drain on the town's resources that could be better spent elsewhere. With that, the women moved on, their heels clicking on the wooden floor as they pretended to inspect the building. Don't mind them, Dolores said quietly once they were out of earshot. They've been trying to redirect the library's funding to their pet projects for years. Patricia's husband wants to build luxury condos where the community garden is, and he needs the council's approval. The community garden? Mei Lin frowned. My grandmother loved that place. We all do, Dolores sighed. But money talks in this town, and the Harringtons have plenty of it. The next morning, Mei Lin walked to the community garden located a few blocks from the library. It wasn't large, just about an acre of land, but it was bursting with life. Vegetables, herbs, and flowers grew in neat plots tended by local residents. In the center stood a small greenhouse where seedlings were started. A middle-aged man with weathered hands was carefully watering a row of tomato plants. He looked up as Mei Lin approached. Morning, he said with a friendly nod. Here to check out a plot? Maybe, Mei Lin replied. My grandmother used to garden here. Mei Chen? The man's face broke into a wide smile. May, of course, I'm Henry. I had the plot next to hers for years. She grew the best snap peas in town. His smile faded a bit. I was sorry to hear of her passing. Thank you. Mei Lin looked around the peaceful garden. I heard this place might be in trouble? Henry's expression darkened. The Harrington Development Company wants to turn it into luxury condos. They claim it'll bring more tax revenue to the town. There's a council meeting tonight about it. I'll be there, Mei Lin said firmly. The town hall was packed that evening. Mei Lin sat near the back, observing as various citizens approached the microphone to speak about the issues on the agenda. When the topic of the community garden and library funding came up, Patricia's husband, Richard Harrington, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit, stood to address the council. Members of the council, fellow citizens of Westbrook, he began smoothly. Our proposal to develop the Heights at Westbrook will bring in an estimated $3 million in tax revenue annually. It will create jobs and attract high-quality residents to our town. The current use of that land, a community garden, while charming, generates zero revenue. Several people in the audience nodded in agreement while others frowned. As for the library, Richard continued, we propose reducing its funding by 50% and redirecting those resources to more pressing needs, like expanding the yacht club facilities which will attract tourism. Dolores stood up next, her voice slightly shaky but determined. The library serves over 5,000 residents annually, including 2,000 children. We offer literacy programs, job, search assistance, and free internet access for those who can't afford it at home. Cutting our funding would devastate these services. Henry spoke about the community garden next, explaining how it provided fresh produce for the food bank and served as an educational space for local schools. Then Patricia approached the microphone, wearing an elegant pantsuit and a concerned expression that seemed practiced. While these services are undoubtedly nice, she said, we must think practically. Westbrook needs growth and prestige, not outdated facilities that serve a limited population. Several more people spoke, the room dividing clearly between longtime residents who valued the existing community spaces and newer, wealthier residents who supported the development plans. Finally, Maylene stood and walked to the microphone. She could feel Patricia and Richard watching her with barely concealed disdain. "My name is Mei-Lin Chen," she began. "My grandmother lived in Westbrook for over 40 years. She taught me that a community is measured not by the size of its yacht club, but by how it treats all its members." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The library and the community garden might not generate tax revenue directly, but they create something more valuable, a place where everyone belongs regardless of income. They build the kind of community that people actually want to live in, not just invest in. Richard Harrington cleared his throat loudly. "While sentiment is touching, Miss Chen, the financial realities—" "I understand financial realities quite well, Mr. Harrington," Mei-Lin interrupted politely. "In fact, I've prepared an alternative proposal." She reached into her bag and pulled out several folders, which she handed to the council members. "This outlines a plan to create a community trust that would fund both the library and the garden for the next 10 years. It would also finance after-school programs and skills training for adults looking to change careers." The council members looked at her in surprise as they flipped through the detailed proposal. "And how exactly would this trust be funded?" Richard asked skeptically. "By me initially," Mei-Lin replied simply, "with a donation of $1 million. A collective gasp went through the room. Patricia's mouth actually fell open. "I'm sorry," said the council chairperson, clearly confused. "Did you say $1 million? "Yes," Mei-Lin nodded. "With the condition that the community garden remains intact and the library receives its full funding." The room erupted in murmurs. Richard Harrington's face had turned an interesting shade of red, while Patricia was frantically whispering to her friends. After the meeting, as people filed out of the town hall, Rosa approached Mei-Lin with wide eyes. "That was amazing," she said. "I've never seen the Harringtons speechless before." Mei-Lin shrugged. "I just did what needed to be done." "But $1 million? How?" Rosa trailed off, clearly not wanting to ask directly. "I've been fortunate in my work," Mei-Lin said simply. As they walked toward the parking lot, Patricia Harrington intercepted them, her smile tight and her eyes calculating. "That was quite a show you put on in there," she said to Mei-Lin. "I'm beginning to think there's more to you than meets the eye." "Most people have depths you can't see on the surface," Mei-Lin replied. Patricia's smile didn't waver. "You must join us for dinner at our home this weekend. We clearly got off on the wrong foot, and I'd love to get to know you better." Mei-Lin could read the sudden interest in Patricia's eyes. It wasn't friendship she was after, but connection to someone she now perceived as useful. "Thank you for the invitation," Mei-Lin said politely, "but I've already committed to helping with the children's reading program at the library this weekend." Patricia's smile dimmed slightly. "Another time, then." As Patricia walked away, Rosa nudged Mei-Lin. "You know she's just trying to figure out where your money comes from, right?" "Oh, I know." Mei-Lin laughed softly. But she'd never believed the truth anyway. Later that night, as Mei-Lin sat on the porch of her grandmother's cottage, her laptop open as she finalized the details of a new tech patent that would likely be worth billions, she smiled to herself. The simple cottage, the old car, the plain clothes, these were choices, not limitations. Her grandmother had taught her that true wealth wasn't about showing off, but about having the freedom to live according to your own values. In the distance, she could see the lights of the large houses on the hill, where Patricia and her friends lived in their beautiful prisons of appearances and social climbing. "You were right, Grandma," Mei-Lin whispered to the stars. "The simplest life is often the richest." Word spread quickly through Westbrook about Mei-Lin's $1 million pledge. As she walked down Main Street the following morning, she noticed people glancing at her with newfound curiosity. Some smiled warmly, while others whispered behind their hands. The small-town grapevine was working overtime, spinning tales about who she might really be. At the daily grind, Dahlia the barista greeted her with a grin. "Your usual tea? It's on the house today." "That's kind, but not necessary," Mei-Lin replied, placing her money on the counter. Everyone's talking about what you did at the town meeting, Dahlia continued, preparing the tea. Patricia Harrington's group was in here earlier, and I swear they nearly broke their necks trying to see if you'd come in. Maylene laughed softly. I'm sure they'll lose interest soon enough. Don't count on it. Nothing excites Westbrook more than a mystery, and you've become the biggest one in years. As if to prove Dahlia's point, the bell above the door jingled, and in walked Bethany Wallace, one of Patricia's closest friends. She pretended to be surprised to see Maylin. Oh, good morning, she said with an exaggerated smile. Maylin, isn't it? I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Bethany Wallace, head of the Westbrook Women's Association. Nice to meet you, Maylin replied politely. I was hoping I'd run into you, Bethany continued, her voice dripping with forced friendliness. We're planning our annual summer fundraiser, and we'd love to have your input. Someone with your philanthropic experience would be invaluable. To our committee. Translation, they wanted access to her checkbook. That's thoughtful of you, Maylene said, but I'm quite busy with the library's children's program and the community garden trust setup. Bethany's smile dimmed slightly. Well, at least consider attending. It's the social event of the season. Everyone who's anyone in Westbrook will be there. I'll think about it, Maylin promised, knowing she probably wouldn't go. After leaving the coffee shop, Maylin headed to the library where she had promised to help Dolores organize a new reading corner for children. On her way, her phone buzzed with a notification about a potential business acquisition. She stepped aside to take the call. Chen speaking, she answered professionally. Ms. Chen, the board is ready to proceed with the Astralink purchase if you give final approval, her chief financial officer explained from halfway across the world. The paperwork needs your digital signature today if we want to close before the quarter ends. Send it through, I'll review and sign within the hour, Maylin replied, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used in business matters, quite different from her gentle demeanor around town. She ended the call just as Rosa approached, carrying her young daughter's hand. The little girl, about 6 years old, had Rosa's warm brown eyes and curly hair pulled into 2 puffy pigtails. Maylin, this is my daughter Zoe. She's been begging to meet the library lady I told her about. Zoe looked up shyly. Do you really know all the books in the whole library? Maylin crouched down to the child's level. Not all of them, but I'm learning. Do you like books? Zoe nodded enthusiastically. I love dragon books, and space books, and books about animals that live underwater. Well, we just got some new books about sea creatures. Would you like to see them? I was heading to the library right now. Can we, Mommy? Please? Zoe bounced on her toes. Rosa looked hesitant. I have to get to my shift at the country club in 20 minutes. I can watch her at the library until you're done, Maylin offered. Dolores and I will make sure she has plenty of books to explore. Are you sure? My shift ends at 4. Absolutely. It'll be fun. As they walked to the library, Zoe chattering away about her favorite stories, Rosa lowered her voice. I heard what happened at the town meeting. That was incredible what you did. Maylin shrugged. It wasn't that big a deal. $1 million isn't a big deal? Rosa raised her eyebrows. For most of us in Westbrook, that's life-changing money. Money is just a tool, Maylin said thoughtfully. It's what you do with it that matters. At the library, Zoe quickly settled in with a stack of picture books about ocean creatures. Maylin helped Dolores arrange furniture for the new children's corner while keeping an eye on the little girl. You're good with children, Dolores observed. They're easy to talk to, Maylin replied. No hidden agendas, no social games. Around noon, the library door opened, and Richard Harrington walked in, looking distinctly out of place in his tailored suit. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Maylin, Ms. Chen, he said with a tight smile. Might I have a word? Maylin glanced at Zoe, who was now helping Dolores put colorful labels on book spines. Of course. What can I do for you, Mr. Harrington? He led her to a quiet corner of the library. I'll be direct. Your proposal at the town meeting was unexpected, but perhaps we can find a middle ground that satisfies both our objectives. I'm listening, Maylin said, though she suspected she wouldn't like what was coming. Your community trust is admirable, but my development would bring long-term economic benefits to Westbrook. What if we modified our plans? We build on half the garden land, preserve the rest, and make a substantial donation to your trust as a show of good faith. Maylin considered his words. The garden stays intact or no deal, Mr. Harrington. However, I'd be open to discussing how your company might participate in improving other areas of town that need revitalization. Richard's expression hardened slightly. You're new here, Ms. Chen. You may not fully understand the dynamics of Westbrook. My family has shaped this town for generations, and my grandmother taught me that even the oldest trees must bend with the wind or risk breaking, Maylin replied evenly. Times change, Mr. Harrington. Communities evolve. A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw. I admire your conviction, misguided though it may be. But I should warn you, making enemies of the Harringtons isn't wise, even for someone with unexpected resources. Before Maylin could respond, a commotion from the front desk drew their attention. Patricia Harrington had arrived with two of her friends, and they were talking loudly despite Dolores's attempts to shush them. Richard, darling, Patricia called out. Are you ready for lunch? We have reservations at the harbor room in 15 minutes. Richard nodded stiffly to Maylin. Consider my offer, Ms. Chen. It won't remain open indefinitely. As he walked away, Maylin noticed Zoe hiding behind a bookshelf, watching the Harringtons with wide eyes. She crouched down beside the little girl. Are you okay, Zoe? The child nodded slowly. That man looks scary when he's angry. Some people just forget their manners sometimes, Maylin said gently. Should we find another sea creature book? Later that afternoon, after Rosa picked up Zoe, Maylin returned to her cottage. She had several video conferences scheduled with her executive team and needed to finalize the Astralink acquisition paperwork. As CEO of Chen Innovations, a fact unknown to anyone in Westbrook, her decisions affected thousands of employees worldwide. She changed into a crisp white blouse for the video call but kept her simple jeans. Only her top half would be visible on camera anyway. The projections for the third quarter look promising, her chief operating officer was saying, especially with the Astralink patents now under our umbrella. Good, Maylin nodded. And the new research facility in Singapore? Construction is ahead of schedule. We should be operational by December. The meeting continued for another hour, with Maylin making decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars from her grandmother's modest living room. When it finally ended, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. The contrast between her two worlds was sometimes exhausting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Emergency, can we talk? I'm outside your house. Alarmed, Maylin hurried to the front door. Rosa stood on the porch, her eyes red from crying. I'm sorry to just show up, Rosa said, her voice shaking. I didn't know where else to go. Come in, Maylin ushered her inside. What happened? Is Zoe okay? Zoe's fine. She's with my neighbor, Rosa said as she sank onto the sofa. I just got fired from the country club. What? Why? They said I was not meeting standards, but that's a lie. Rosa wiped angrily at her tears. I've worked there for 3 years without a single complaint. But today, after lunch service, Patricia Harrington spoke to the manager, and suddenly I'm called into the office and let go. Maylin's stomach tightened. This happened after the Harringtons saw you with me at the library. Rosa nodded miserably. It can't be a coincidence. And the worst part is I have Zoe's medical bills coming up. She needs her tonsils removed next month and without insurance from the club. Don't worry about the medical bills, Maylin said immediately. I'll take care of them. I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask. I offered, Maylin said firmly. And I'll help you find a new job, a better one. Rosa looked up with uncertainty in her eyes. Why would you do this for me? We barely know each other. Maylin thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that wealth without compassion was worthless. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I know what it's like to be underestimated and dismissed. That evening, after Rosa left with a plan in place and her spirit somewhat lifted, Maylene sat on her porch watching the sunset. The Harringtons' message had been clear. Cross them and they would make life difficult for you and anyone associated with you. It was a familiar tactic in the business world, where Maylene had faced her share of bullies and power plays. But she hadn't expected to find the same behavior in this small coastal town that her grandmother had loved so much. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. The Astralink acquisition was complete. Chen Innovations had just added another $1 billion to its value. Meanwhile, the Harringtons were playing small-town politics, unaware that the woman they were trying to intimidate could buy their entire real estate company with what amounted to pocket change in her world. The irony wasn't lost on Maylene. She could end this whole situation with a single phone call, reveal who she really was, flex her financial muscle, and watch the Harringtons scramble to apologize. But that wasn't her grandmother's way, and it wasn't hers either. "Patience," she whispered to herself, remembering her grandmother's favorite saying. "Water doesn't cut through stone with force, but with persistence." As darkness fell over Westbrook, lights began to twinkle on the hill where the town's wealthiest residents lived. Maylene made herself a cup of tea and opened her laptop. She had research to do about the Harrington Development Company, about Richard and Patricia's other business interests, about the town council members and their connections. Knowledge was power, and Maylene Chen had built an empire on both. The Harringtons had no idea who they were dealing with, but they would learn, gradually and on her terms. She took a sip of tea and began typing. 2 weeks passed, and Westbrook was buzzing with whispers and theories about Maylene. Some said she was a lottery winner hiding from publicity. Others guessed she was a reclusive artist or writer. A few even suggested she might be running from the law. No one came close to guessing the truth. Maylene continued her quiet routine, volunteering at the library, tending to the community garden, and running her global tech empire from behind her laptop screen. She had also helped Rosa secure a better-paying job as an office manager at a local medical clinic, with health benefits that would cover Zoe's upcoming surgery. What no one in town knew was that Maylene had been busy with another project. After her confrontation with Richard Harrington, she had her legal team quietly investigating his business dealings. What they found was concerning. Several environmental violations at his development sites, tax discrepancies, and a pattern of underpaying local contractors. It was a gray Tuesday morning when Maylene's doorbell rang unexpectedly. She opened the front door to find Dolores from the library standing there looking distressed. "Dolores, is everything okay?" "I'm sorry to bother you at home," Dolores said, wringing her hands. "But something's happened, and I thought you should know right away." Maylene invited her in and put the kettle on. "Tell me what's going on." "The historic theater downtown. It's being foreclosed on," Dolores explained, accepting a mug of tea with shaking hands. "The owner, Mr. Finch, has fallen behind on payments since his wife got sick. The bank is selling it, and guess who's first in line to buy it? Let me guess. Harrington Development?" Dolores nodded grimly. "They're planning to tear it down and build luxury apartments. That theater has been the heart of Westbrook since 1925. My parents had their first date there. So did I and my late husband." Maylene frowned. The Westbrook Theater was a beautiful Art Deco building that showed classic films and hosted community events. Losing it would be another blow to the town's character. "When is the foreclosure auction?" "Friday morning," Dolores replied. "Richard Harrington was in the library earlier, loudly discussing his plans for the property with some investors. He seemed to want me to overhear, like he was sending a message after the community garden setback." "I see," Maylene said quietly, her mind already working on a solution. "Try not to worry too much, Dolores. These things have a way of working themselves out." After Dolores left, Maylene made several phone calls, first to her attorneys, then to her financial team. By that afternoon, she had established a new corporation called Westbrook Heritage Preservation, LLC, with herself as the anonymous primary investor. She then had her team reach out to Mr. Finch with an offer to settle his debt privately before the foreclosure auction. Meanwhile, across town at the Harrington estate, Patricia was hosting a luncheon for her inner circle. The sprawling mansion overlooked the ocean, with manicured gardens and a swimming pool that sparkled in the sunlight. Inside, the dining room was set with fine china and crystal glasses. "I simply don't understand where this woman came from," Patricia was saying as she poured more wine for her guests. "According to Bethany's cousin who works at First National Bank, she made that $1 million deposit in cash. Who carries that kind of money around?" "Maybe she's in the witness protection program," suggested Vivian, a thin woman with perfectly highlighted hair. "Or married to someone infamous and hiding out." "Whatever her story is," Patricia continued, "Richard says we need to be careful. Anyone with that kind of money thrown around casually must have significant resources. He's concerned about the community garden project falling through." "Oh, please," scoffed Bethany. "She lives in that tiny cottage and drives that awful old car. How threatening can she really be?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Don't underestimate her. I've been doing some digging. Did you know she takes international business calls at odd hours? My gardener's son lives on the same street and says he's seen her pacing on the porch at 3 a.m., speaking what sounded like Mandarin." "Intriguing," murmured Vivian. "What's your plan?" Patricia smiled thinly. "First we find out who she really is. Then we decide if she's someone to bring into our circle, or someone to neutralize." The next day, Mei Lin was helping at the library when Rosa rushed in with Zoe. "Have you heard the news?" Rosa asked excitedly. "Someone bought the theater's debt. The foreclosure is off." Dolores looked up from the circulation desk, her face brightening. "Really? Who?" "Nobody knows," Rosa replied. "Mr. Finch said a lawyer contacted him yesterday and paid off everything he owed. The only condition was that the theater remains operating as a community space for at least 50 years. Dolores's eyes drifted to Mei Lin, who was shelving books nearby, suspicion dawning on her face. But she said nothing. Later that afternoon, Richard Harrington stormed into the library, his face flushed with anger. He marched straight to where Mei Lin was helping a young boy find a book on dinosaurs. "A word, Miss Chen," he said through clenched teeth. Mei Lin excused herself from the child and followed Richard to a quiet corner. "Was it you?" he demanded without preamble. "Did you interfere with the theater purchase?" "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mr. Harrington," Mei Lin replied calmly, though her eyes held a hint of knowing. "Don't play innocent," he hissed. "First the garden, now the theater. You're deliberately sabotaging my business interests in this town." Mei Lin regarded him steadily. "The garden belongs to the community, not to your development company. And as for the theater, it sounds like whoever saved it wants to preserve Westbrook's history and culture. Isn't that a good thing?" Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully. I've been in business for 30 years. I've dealt with competitors far more formidable than some mystery woman playing small-town hero. Whatever game you're playing, I will find out who you really are and what you're after." "I'm not after anything, Mr. Harrington," Mei Lin replied. "I'm simply living my life according to my values, as my grandmother taught me." Richard straightened his tie, composing himself. "We'll see about that. Nobody comes into my town and undermines my projects without consequences." As he turned to leave, Mei Lin called after him quietly. "It's not your town, Mr. Harrington. It belongs to all the people who live here. The librarians and the gardeners, the children who need safe places to learn, the families who want to watch classic movies together. That's what community means." Richard's only response was a cold stare before he walked out. That evening, Mei Lin received an unexpected visitor, Bethany Wallace, Patricia's friend, who appeared on her doorstep with a bottle of expensive champagne. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Bethany said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I thought it was time we properly welcomed you to Westbrook." Mei Lin recognized the visit for what it was, a reconnaissance mission, but invited her in any way. "What a cozy place," Bethany remarked, looking around the cottage with barely disguised disdain. Her gaze lingered on Mei Lin's laptop, which was open on the dining table displaying complex financial spreadsheets. Mei Lin casually closed it as she fetched glasses for the champagne. "It suits my needs," Mei Lin replied. "My grandmother was never one for excess." "How admirable," Bethany said, taking a seat on the sofa. You know, we're all quite curious about you, Mei Lin. You've made quite an impression in such a short time. I'm really not that interesting, Mei Lin demurred. Oh, I doubt that, Bethany laughed lightly. A woman who can write $1 million check on a whim is definitely interesting. What exactly is it that you do? Remote consulting, Mei Lin replied, with the same vague answer she always gave. In what field? Technology, mostly. Bethany's eyes lit up. How fascinating. My husband works in tech as well. He's on the board of NetSphere Industries. Perhaps you've crossed paths? Mei Lin nearly smiled at the irony. She had considered buying NetSphere last year but decided against it due to their outdated product line. It's possible, though I tend to work behind the scenes. The conversation continued with Bethany dropping names and asking increasingly probing questions about Mei Lin's past, education, and connections. Mei Lin deflected gracefully, revealing nothing of substance while maintaining polite conversation. Finally, after nearly an hour, Bethany gave up. Well, I should be going, but you simply must attend our charity auction next month. The governor will be there, along with several state senators. I'll check my calendar, Mei Lin said non-committally as she showed Bethany out. As soon as the door closed, Mei Lin's phone rang, a secure line from her office. We have a situation, her chief security officer said without preamble. Someone's been making inquiries about you, professional-level background checks, financial traces. They're trying to connect Mei Lin Chen with Chen Innovations. The Harringtons, Mei Lin sighed. Sooner than I expected. How close are they? Not very. Your privacy protocols are top-notch, but they've hired a good firm, Dixon Investigative Services. Mei Lin thought for a moment. Increase our security monitoring, but don't take any countermeasures yet. Let's see how far they get. After ending the call, Mei Lin walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The peaceful life she had hoped to build in her grandmother's hometown was becoming complicated. Perhaps it had been naive to think she could live simply, and anonymously even temporarily. The next morning, Mei Lin was preparing for a video conference with her executive team when her doorbell rang again. This time it was Rosa and Zoe. We come bearing gifts, Rosa announced, holding up a basket of homemade cookies. Zoe wanted to thank you for the books you lent her. I read them all, Zoe declared proudly. Even the chapter book. Mei Lin smiled warmly. That's wonderful, Zoe. Would you like to borrow some more? As Zoe explored the small bookshelf in the living room, Rosa lowered her voice. There's something else. I overheard something at the clinic yesterday. Patricia Harrington came in for her Botox appointment and she was on the phone with someone, a private investigator, I think. She was asking for information about you. Mei Lin nodded, unsurprised. Thank you for letting me know. Are you in some kind of trouble? Rosa asked, concern evident in her eyes. Because if you need help, I'm not in trouble, Mei Lin assured her. The Harringtons are just curious about me, and people like them don't like what they can't understand or control. Rosa studied her for a moment. You're not just a normal person with some savings, are you? There's more to your story. Mei Lin hesitated. She hadn't shared her true identity with anyone in Westbrook, but Rosa had proven herself a loyal friend. Let's just say, Mei Lin said carefully, that I have more resources than the Harringtons, realize, and I know how to handle people like them. Rosa seemed to accept this partial answer. Well, whatever's going on, you helped me when I needed it. So if you need backup, I'm your person. That afternoon, Mei Lin decided it was time to prepare for the inevitable. The Harringtons were closing in and soon her identity would be discovered. She needed to be ready when that happened. She made a series of calls to her executive team, adjusting her schedule for the coming weeks. Then she contacted her lawyers to prepare certain documents. Finally, she reached out to a real estate agent, not in Westbrook, but in the neighboring town. That evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Mei Lin sat on her porch swing with a cup of tea. Despite the brewing conflict with the Harringtons, she felt strangely at peace. Her grandmother had always said that living truthfully was its own reward, even when it was difficult. I think it's almost time to stop hiding, Grandma, she whispered to the twilight sky. but I'll do it my way. In the distance, the lights of the Harrington mansion glowed on the hillside, bright and imposing, but Mei Lin's eyes were drawn instead to the humble community garden, where new seedlings were pushing through the soil, and to the historic theater downtown where the marquee lights had been turned on for the first time in months. Whatever came, next she was ready. The Westbrook Country Club ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and polished silver. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns mingled, champagne glasses in hand. The annual Governor's Charity Ball was the most prestigious event of the season, attended by politicians, business leaders, and Westbrook's social elite. Patricia Harrington stood near the entrance, greeting guests with practiced charm. Her red gown was custom-made in Paris and diamonds sparkled at her throat and wrists. Tonight was her moment to shine as chair of the event committee. "Governor Wilson, so delighted you could join us," she cooed as the governor and his wife entered. "We've seated you at the main table, of course." As Patricia continued welcoming VIPs, her husband Richard huddled with a gray-haired man in the corner. The man passed him a manila envelope. "That's everything we could find," the man said quietly. "Not much, I'm afraid. She's very careful." Richard frowned as he skimmed the contents. Nothing concrete linking her to Chen Innovations. Only circumstantial evidence. Same name, similar age, educational background matches. But no photographs of the CEO exist publicly, and the company is notoriously private. We'd need access to sealed financial records to confirm. Richard closed the envelope with a frustrated sigh. "Keep digging. There has to be something." Meanwhile, across town, Mei Lin was putting the finishing touches on her appearance. Tonight, for the first time since arriving in Westbrook, she had opened the hidden compartment in her suitcase. Inside lay the few luxury items she had brought: a simple but elegant black dress, a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, and a small velvet box containing her mother's jade pendant. Rosa sat on the bed, watching with wide eyes as Mei Lin transformed herself. With her hair styled in a sophisticated updo and a touch of makeup enhancing her features, she looked different, still elegant in her simplicity, but undeniably striking. "You clean up pretty good for a humble librarian volunteer," Rosa teased. Mei Lin laughed. "Don't get used to it. Tomorrow it's back to jeans and sweaters." "So you're really going through with this? Showing up at their fancy party?" Mei Lin nodded as she fastened the jade pendant around her neck. "It's time. The Harringtons won't stop digging, and I'm tired of the games." "Well, I wish I could see their faces when you walk in," Rosa said with a grin. "Promise you'll tell me every detail tomorrow." "I promise," Mei Lin replied. She checked her phone one last time, confirming that everything was in place for tonight. Her lawyers had sent the final documents and her executive team was on standby. As she drove toward the country club in her old Toyota, which she had at least washed for the occasion, Mei Lin felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her would miss the anonymity of being just Mei Chen's granddaughter, the simple woman in the cottage by the sea. But another part was ready to stand in her truth, whatever consequences might follow. At the country club, the evening was progressing smoothly. Dinner had been served, speeches made, and now the live auction was underway, with proceeds benefiting children's education. "Next item," announced the auctioneer, "a week-long stay at the exclusive Alpine Sky Resort in Switzerland, including private jet transportation. Bidding starts at $20,000. Paddles rose around the room as Westbrook's wealthy residents competed to outbid each other, as much for status as for charity. "Do I hear 50,000? The auctioneer called. 50,000 from Mrs. Harrington." Patricia smiled smugly as heads turned in her direction. No one had outbid her on an auction item in 3 years. Going once, going twice. 100,000, called a clear voice from the back of the room. The crowd turned to see who had doubled Patricia's bid. Standing in the doorway was Mei Lin, looking poised and confident in her simple black dress. Patricia's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Richard straightened in his chair, eyes narrowing. $100,000, the auctioneer repeated, recovering from his surprise. "Do I hear any advance on 100,000? Patricia's face flushed as she raised her paddle. 120,000. Mei Lin smiled slightly. 200,000. A murmur ran through the crowd. Governor Wilson leaned toward his aide, whispering a question. Patricia's hand tightened around her paddle, but before she could speak, Richard placed his hand on her arm, stopping her. His expression was calculating as he studied Mei Lin. Sold for $200,000, the auctioneer declared with enthusiasm. As Mei Lin made her way to the payment table, the whispers around her grew louder. She could feel Patricia's glare burning into her back. Ms. Chen, Richard approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. What a surprise to see you here. I didn't realize you were interested in alpine skiing. I enjoy many things, Mr. Harrington, Mei Lin replied calmly, some of which might surprise you. Indeed, he said, studying her carefully. You continue to be full of surprises. As Richard led her toward their table, where Patricia sat rigidly beside the governor, Mei Lin could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. He was trying to reconcile her confident presence tonight with the simple woman in jeans who volunteered at the library. Governor Wilson, Richard said smoothly, allow me to introduce Mei Lin Chen, a recent addition to our community. The governor stood politely. Ms. Chen, that was quite a generous bid. Are you in the philanthropy business? Among other things, Mei Lin replied with a smile. I believe in supporting education, particularly in underserved communities. A worthy cause, the governor nodded. Richard tells me you've made quite an impression on Westbrook in a short time. Has he? Mei Lin's eyes met Richard's. I'm just trying to honor my grandmother's legacy. Patricia, unable to contain herself any longer, jumped in. Your grandmother's legacy of living in a tiny cottage and driving a 20-year-old car? Yet somehow you can afford to throw around hundreds of thousands of dollars at charity auctions? The table fell silent at her rudeness. The governor's wife looked embarrassed. Patricia, Richard warned under his breath, but Mei Lin remained unruffled. My grandmother taught me that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. She lived simply by choice, not necessity, a value she passed on to me. And what exactly is the source of this wealth you're so eager to give away? Patricia pressed, ignoring her husband's warning glance. Mei Lin looked around the table, then at the room full of curious onlookers pretending not to listen. The moment she had prepared for had arrived. I'm the founder and CEO of Chen Innovations, she said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard's face went slack with shock. The governor nearly spilled his drink. Chen Innovations? He repeated. The tech company valued at over $40 billion? Mei Lin nodded. The same. Patricia's face had drained of color. That's impossible. You live in a cottage. You drive an old Toyota. By choice, Mei Lin repeated gently. My grandmother believed that ostentation creates distance between people. I found that wisdom valuable in my own life, particularly as my company grew. Richard had recovered enough to ask, why the secrecy? Why come to Westbrook and pretend to be ordinary? I never pretended to be anything, Mei Lin corrected him. I simply lived quietly. After my grandmother passed, I wanted to reconnect with her world, to experience the community she loved without the noise that often surrounds wealth and position. The governor was now looking at Mei Lin with intense interest. Ms. Chen, your company's innovations in renewable energy storage have been groundbreaking. I'd love to discuss potential state partnerships. As the governor engaged her in conversation, Mei Lin could see Patricia whispering frantically to Bethany across the table. Richard was on his phone, presumably verifying her identity. The news was spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Later that evening, as Mei Lin prepared to leave, Richard intercepted her near the coat check. I underestimated you, he admitted, his tone a mixture of respect and wariness. A mistake I won't make again. We don't have to be adversaries, Mr. Harrington, Mei Lin replied. Westbrook is big enough for both of us, if we focus on what's best for the community. Richard studied her for a long moment. You're planning something bigger than a community garden and an old theater, aren't you? Mei Lin smiled enigmatically. I'll see you at the town council meeting next week. The following Monday, Mei Lin stood before the Westbrook Town Council in the packed meeting hall. Gone were her usual jeans and sweater, replaced by a professional but modest suit. Behind her sat Rosa, Dolores, Henry from the garden, and dozens of other townspeople who had come to support her. "Ladies and gentlemen of the council," Mei Lin began, "I'm here to propose the establishment of the Westbrook Community Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Even the council members looked stunned. This foundation will focus on 4 key areas: education, historical preservation, environmental protection, and small business development. Its goal is to ensure that Westbrook grows economically while preserving the character and community spirit that makes it special." As Mei Lin outlined her vision, she noticed the Harringtons sitting in the back row. Patricia looked subdued, while Richard watched with thoughtful concentration. "In addition," Mei Lin continued, "Chen Innovations will be opening a research facility on the abandoned industrial site at the edge of town, bringing 300 new jobs to the area." The crowd erupted in applause. The mayor, beaming, called for order. "Ms. Chen, this is extraordinary," he said. "But may I ask why Westbrook? You could establish your research facility anywhere in the world." Mei Lin's eyes softened. "My grandmother loved this town. She taught me that roots matter, that community matters. In our increasingly digital world, Chen Innovations is committed to creating technology that brings people together, rather than isolating them. What better place to pursue that mission than in a town that understands the value of connection?" After the meeting, as people crowded around to congratulate her, Mei Lin felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Patricia Harrington standing there, looking uncomfortable. "That was quite a presentation," Patricia said stiffly. "Thank you," Mei Lin replied, waiting. Patricia seemed to struggle with her next words. I may have been hasty in my judgment of you." It wasn't quite an apology, but for Patricia it was significant. Mei Lin nodded acknowledgement. "We all make judgments based on appearances," she said. "The question is whether we're willing to look deeper when those judgments are proven wrong." Patricia glanced around at the community members celebrating Mei Lin's announcement. "You've certainly won them over." "It's not about winning, Mrs. Harrington, it's about belonging, something money can't buy." A month later, Mei Lin sat on the porch of her grandmother's cottage, watching the sunset. She had kept the cottage, though she had also purchased a larger home nearby to accommodate her work needs when she was in town, which was now frequently. Rosa sat beside her, both of them enjoying the peaceful evening. Zoe was playing in the garden, her tonsil surgery long behind her. "So," Rosa said, "how does it feel? No more hiding who you are, no more whispers behind your back." Mei Lin smiled. "Freeing, in some ways. Complicated in others, but right." In the distance they could see the town of Westbrook, its lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. The old theater's marquee was lit up for a special community showing of classic films. The community garden was thriving, with new plots added to meet demand. Even the Harringtons had adapted. Richard had approached Mei Lin with a proposal to collaborate on developing affordable housing, a surprising pivot that she suspected came after he realized fighting her was futile. Patricia had resigned as chair of the Women's Association, passing the role to a committee that now included Dolores from the library. "You changed this town," Rosa observed. "Not just with your money, but with your example." Mei Lin shook her head. "The town was always good at heart, it just needed a reminder of what really matters." As the last rays of sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Mei Lin thought about her grandmother. She had come to Westbrook seeking connection to her past, but had found so much more: a future, a community, a purpose. The simple woman in the cottage had finally come home, bringing all parts of herself together. And in doing so, she had helped a town remember its own heart. "To new beginnings," Mei Lin said, raising her teacup. Rosa clinked her cup against Mei Lin's. "And to seeing people for who they really are, not what they appear to be." In the fading light, Mei Lin Chen, billionaire CEO, community volunteer, keeper of her grandmother's wisdom, smiled contentedly. Sometimes the richest lives were simplest ones, and the most valuable things couldn't be bought at any price.